Justin Good is our judge for the May 2013 projected competition. This is an open-themed month. Justin has been shooting photographs since 2007 and works as a freelance photographer. He's a self-taught photographer who focuses on all aspects of photography. His primary focus currently is instant film, and he promotes that medium to other photographers via the Instant Film Society, an organization that he co-founded last year. Exposed Lake Bed by Ken Murphy. The pattern of the cable is visually striking. Rather than framing everything around the cable, if the cable was your subject, choosing to shoot an abstract macro shot would help bring focus to it. The image does appear to be over-sharpened. 8 points. Get That Camera Out of My Face by Barbara Briley. The colors here complement one another. The clone stamping technique needs to be improved. Masks would help you have a better edge definition between the background and the line. 8 points. Light Through Leaf by Jackie Carver. Very nice colors in this image. Focus could be a little more spot on. Framing the subject in such a way that it creates a more abstract image or uses lines and shapes to draw in the viewer would be helpful. 8 points. Balcones Espanolas by Evan Simmons. The exposure is spot on here. The colors work well together. Rather than focusing on just the balconies, perhaps including the shadows that were to the left might have been a little more interesting. Not including the balcony in the bottom of the frame would help draw your attention to the subject, which seems to be the top balcony. 9 points. Gypsy Love Song by Delise Foglia. The setting here draws the viewer in. Including some people who might have been watching this performer would help tie things together. Without their inclusion, it lacks that extra thought-provoking detail. 9 points. Blue Jay in the Bush by Chris Kobos. The bird's position in the frame observes the rule of thirds. This image appears to be a little underexposed. Framing the bird in an area that draws more attention to it could help. Using depth of field to your advantage could help improve this image as well. 10 points. Calatrava 1, Valencia, Spain by Jim Stump. Exposure here is spot on. Rather than focusing on this subject as a whole, I think getting closer and using the repeating elements of the structure as a subject might have been a little more striking. Placing the people within a scene of repeating patterns would have been more visually appealing as well. 10 points. Give Up the Ghost by David Reese. The ghostly figure here is intriguing. This looks very good, but I think the shape is a little confusing and not quite ghost-like. It looks more like a jellyfish. 10 points. Heritage by Julie Horak. Colors here are beautiful. Focusing on the beadwork and feathers rather than including the outside elements, the children in the background, would draw your attention more to the subject that was being framed. 10 points and honorable mention. Dawn Patrol by Michael Farnham. Great light and good composition. Getting closer could have helped make this image pop a little more. I do realize you're stuck with what lenses you have at the time. 10 points and third place. In the Gloaming of the Night by Michael Rivera. The out-of-focus elements here are pleasing to the eye. It looks as if a touch of fill flash was used. I think using natural light at the right time of day might have helped this image. The fill light almost brings out too much focus to the branch and not to the flowers. 11 points and second place. 1920s Flashback by Penny Clark. The lighting in this image is pretty good. Rather than shooting this scene in a studio setting, a more appropriate place might have been somewhere on location. The background seems to take away from that 20s vibe. 11 points and first place. Advanced Projected. What's That? By Virginia Summerall. Cute image for a family. I think focusing on the expressions between the little girl and the older gentleman would have helped. Focusing on her digging around in his hair isn't particularly visually appealing for the viewer. 8 points. Field of Dreams by Richard Stern. The bokeh here is nice. The colors are pleasing. Focusing on one flower rather than a line of them and getting closer to the flower would have helped blur out the background more. In turn, it would bring more attention to the tulips themselves. 10 points. Flying Splits by Steve Havicek. Great action shot. Using an f2.8 zoom lens might bring a little more focus to the subject, blurring out the distracting background elements. 10 points. Fusica Bell by Dave Rocher. Classic water droplets on a flower. It seems as if the image was cropped in order to bring the focus to the subject. I think bumping the contrast up would help. A touch of sharpening around the droplets and flower would help it pop more. 10 points. Red Paint Spatter by Waylon Threadgill. Great idea for a stock image. Next time, try centering the paintbrush for this type of image. 10 points. Summer Dream by Rachel Cook. The subject's placement in the frame is spot on. It looks to be slightly over-processed. Shadows are lacking detail. Using a strobe to fill in a little bit of light on her while underexposing the scene a half to one stop would help draw attention to her more. 10 points. Time to Retire by Bill Cashin. Title of the image is fitting. It looks to be a bit too contrasty, and the shadow detail is lacking. 10 points. Chinatown by Steve Reeves. The street and buildings draw you into this image. Shooting at a different time of day, dusk perhaps, would bring focus to the neon lights of Chinatown. Also, you might have been able to capture a more dramatic sky and not have had a blown-out sky. 11 points. Devil's Eye at Sunset by Mel Sharp. Gorgeous scene. I think this image might have been overprocessed a little bit. There seems to be a lack of shadow detail, and it looks a little too blue in the shadows. 11 points. Dwyer's Cafe by Ashley Bischoff. Nice location. More shadow detail on the bike, perhaps waiting a little longer to shoot this image. A longer exposure would have brought out more color in the sky. 11 points. Monument Rocks, Kansas by Aaron Curry. The light in this image is beautiful, along with the color. I think using the repeating elements of the grass on the ground could help bring your eye up to the monuments. Finding a position that draws you into the subject would be helpful. 11 points. Piano Lesson by Tom Kozlowski. The light in this image is quite appealing. It looks to be a touch out of focus, as if you were focused in between the little girl and what looks to be a pedal steel player. 11 points. Welcoming Musicians by Betty Johnson. Composition is good. The vignetting is a little too heavy-handed. I would have used one of the sharpening tools to make the musicians pop a little bit more. 11 points. Letters by Bob Krause. Composition is good, including some of the other elements around what looks like to be the door frame would help bring it all together. 11 points and honorable mention. Bluebonnets at Sunrise by John Fowler. Color and exposure look good. I think positioning the bluebonnets in the frame without as much fence might have helped. 11 points and third place. White Sands by Karen Mack. Beautiful scene and colors. Framing the cactus flower a little more to the right might improve the composition. 12 points and second place. Walking the Dog by Morris Stein. Beautiful setting. It was only when I read Walking the Dog in the title that I even noticed the dog in the image. If the animal being walked was the intended subject, focusing more on that might help. 12 points and first place. Masters Projected. Hiding Among the Decorations by Susan Stageman. The exposure here is spot on. Using a longer lens and blurring out the foreground elements would help bring your attention solely to the cat. 9 points. Mates for Life by Jay Hoppenstein. Nice and tight on the action in the image. It seems to be somewhat of an awkward moment between the birds. Perhaps another encounter would have been best expressed for them being mates for life. 10 points. Off the Floor Ballet Academy in Camagüey, Cuba, by Janie Rumberger. You captured the dancer at her perfect moment. The background elements are distracting. The expression on the woman in the back pulls you away from the action taking place. 10 points. On the Wrong Side of the Fence by Susan Burciaga. Nice and sharp. Given that the title is On the Wrong Side of the Fence, including barbed wire or other fence details might have brought the idea and the image a little closer together. 10 points. Pure Form and Color by Jeff Glass. The colors really pop in this winter scene. Adding more negative space above the image would help draw your attention to the cushions a bit more. Also, eliminating the yellow stool or footrest in the image would bring more focus to the repeating patterns of color of the cushions. 10 points. Bluebonnets Under a Texas Sky by Suzanne Graham. The color, the exposure, and the scene are beautiful. I think the composition could be improved. The left tree has been chopped off a bit. Focusing on 1 or 2 trees instead of a cluster would help the image. 11 points. Pink Ambrosia by Steve Newman. Gorgeous colors. I think centering the flower would have been a little more fitting for this type of image. 11 points. Roping the Little Doggy by Harry Rumberger. Great moment. The image is super sharp, too. Framing a little higher, reducing the amount of negative space on the ground, and zooming in a little closer, if you could have, might have brought more attention to the subject. 11 points. Adagio by Houston Brown. Great Photoshop work. The desaturated look is a little too much, in my opinion. I think keeping some of the greens would have helped make the dancer pop a bit more. 12 points. Box Elder Bug by Tina Arms. Sharp focus, great amount of detail. The white vignetting is a little heavy. Adding a touch of contrast to the image overall could help bring out the bug and make it pop a bit more. 12 points. Mosaic Canyon by Dennis Fritchie. Sharp. I love the different tonal aspects of the rocks throughout this image. I think adding a person to the frame to add perspective could help. 12 points. Sunrise with Bluebonnets by Gary Kelly. Pretty location and sunset. I think the processing might have been a little heavy-handed. A little less contrast and saturation might help. 12 points. Alluvial Fan, Death Valley by Bob Johnson. What a location! Beautiful colors and incredible detail. 13 points and honorable mention. On a Red Flower by Kay Hargis. The detail, focus, and depth of field look wonderful. I would rather have seen the bee facing towards the camera, but that's just my personal opinion. 13 points and 3rd place. Painting Within a Photo by Kay Hale. What a location. Beautiful. Perhaps eliminating some of the negative space to the left of the image. Perhaps zooming or cropping in a little tighter. Maybe shooting the painting and slightly blurring out the background. 13 points and 2nd place. Aaron by Bill Nafee. The lighting and composition, the pose are all very good. 14 points and 1st place.